Sarah Martinez had dreamed of joining the Navy SEALs since she was 12 years old. Growing up in a small Texas town, she watched documentaries about elite warriors and knew that was her calling. But when she arrived at Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL training, known as BUD/S, she quickly realized that dreams and reality were two very different things. The moment she stepped off the bus at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, whispers followed her like shadows. She was one of only 3 women in a class of 85 candidates, and the male recruits made their opinions known immediately. They called her Princess and Barbie behind her back, sometimes even to her face. During the first week of training, when she struggled to keep up with the faster runners, they would lap her and mutter comments about how she was taking up a spot that belonged to a real warrior. The instructors weren't much better initially. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a weathered veteran with 20 years of service, seemed to have it out for her from day one. During push-up drills, he would stand over her and count slower, making her hold positions longer than the men. When she completed obstacle courses within regulation time, he would find faults that weren't there. "Martinez, your form was sloppy. Do it again," became his favorite phrase. Sarah's bunkmates were polite, but distant. They would talk around her during meal times, discussing their weekend plans, or sharing stories from back home as if she wasn't sitting right there. When she tried to join conversations, responses were short and conversations died quickly. The isolation was harder than any physical challenge the training threw at her. But Sarah had something the others didn't know about. Hidden beneath her standard-issue training shirt was a tattoo that covered most of her back. It wasn't the typical butterfly or flower that people might expect from a young woman. Instead, it was an intricate design that told a story of loss, determination, and honor. The tattoo depicted a military cemetery with rows of white crosses, and flying above them was an eagle with ribbons in its talons. On those ribbons were names, 7 names of soldiers who had died in combat. Each name represented a family member Sarah had lost to war. Her father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, had died in Afghanistan when she was 15. Her uncle Carlos had been killed in Iraq. Her older brother Danny had lost his life in Syria just 2 years earlier. The tattoo was her way of carrying their memory and their sacrifice with her wherever she went. But she kept it hidden, knowing that showing it would invite questions she wasn't ready to answer. The physical training was brutal. Every morning started at 0500 hours with a 4-mile run on the beach. Sarah's lungs burned as she tried to keep pace with the pack, sand filling her boots and making each step heavier than the last. The ocean was freezing, and during surf torture exercises, she would lie in the icy water until her lips turned blue and her entire body shook uncontrollably. While other candidates complained loudly, Sarah gritted her teeth and endured in silence. During Hell Week, the legendary 5.5-day period where candidates get a total of 4 hours of sleep while enduring constant physical and mental stress, Sarah's resolve was tested like never before. On the second night, as she carried heavy logs with her boat crew across soft sand dunes, 3 of her teammates collapsed from exhaustion. The instructors immediately started yelling at the remaining crew members, including Sarah, for not motivating their fallen teammates properly. "Martinez, you think this is some kind of game? These men are counting on you, and you're letting them down." Chief Rodriguez screamed in her face, his voice barely audible over the wind and crashing waves. Sarah wanted to scream back that she had been carrying more than her share of weight the entire time, that she had been the one encouraging the others when they wanted to quit. Instead, she helped her teammates to their feet and continued the exercise. That night, 2 more candidates rang the bell, the symbolic gesture of quitting BUD/S training. Sarah watched them walk away with their heads down and promised herself she would never be one of them. The harassment from her fellow candidates got worse as the weeks went on and the class size dwindled. During chow time, someone would accidentally spill drink on her uniform. During gear inspections, her equipment would mysteriously go missing, forcing her to scramble to find replacements, and often earning her punishment for being unprepared. In the barracks, she would find crew drawings and messages left on her bunk. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of dive training, where Sarah had successfully completed underwater knot-tying exercises that caused 3 male candidates to fail, she overheard a conversation that cut deeper than any physical pain she had endured. "I don't care what anyone says, she doesn't belong here," whispered candidate Johnson, a muscular guy from Ohio who had been a college football player. "This isn't about equality or fairness. This is about life and death in the field. Would you want her watching your back in combat?" "Absolutely not," replied candidate Williams. "She's tough. I'll give her that, but tough isn't enough. When bullets start flying and we need to carry a wounded teammate to safety, is she going to be able to lift a 200-pound man in full gear?" "I don't think so." Sarah lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling and fighting back tears. She knew they were talking about valid concerns that many people in the military had about women in combat roles. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know about the promise she had made to her dying brother or about the generations of military service in her family. They saw her as an outsider trying to invade their brotherhood, not as someone who had earned her place through blood, sweat, and personal sacrifice. The next morning brought log PT, one of the most dreaded exercises in BUD/S training. Boat crews of 7 people had to lift and maneuver massive telephone pole-sized logs in various exercises designed to build teamwork and mental toughness. Sarah's boat crew had been struggling because they were down 2 members who had quit the previous week, leaving only 5 people to do the work of 7. As they struggled to lift their log overhead for the 5th set of presses, candidate Martinez, a guy from her crew with the same last name, but no relation, collapsed underneath the weight. The log came crashing down, and if Sarah hadn't jumped forward to help catch it, it would have seriously injured him. Her quick thinking saved her teammate from a potential broken collarbone or worse. But instead of thanks, she received more ridicule. "Great, now Princess has to save us," muttered someone from another boat crew. The comment was loud enough for several instructors to hear, but they said nothing. Sarah helped Martinez to his feet, and they continued the exercise, but the damage to her confidence was becoming harder to repair. That night, Sarah sat alone on the beach after evening chow, watching the sunset and questioning whether she had what it took to complete the program. The physical challenges were difficult, but manageable. The real battle was against the constant psychological warfare from people who were supposed to be her teammates and future brothers in arms. She pulled out a small photo she kept in her pocket, a picture of her brother Danny in his Army uniform, taken just before his final deployment. He had been her biggest supporter when she announced her intention to try for the SEALs. "You're tougher than any of us ever were, Sarah," he had told her. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." As she sat there holding his photo, Sarah made a decision. She was going to complete this training, not just for herself, but for every family member who had served and died for their country. She was going to prove that heart and determination mattered more than gender or physical size. But first, she had to survive the next phase of training, which would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The weeks ahead would bring underwater demolition training, land warfare exercises, and the final crucible that would determine who earned the right to call themselves a Navy SEAL. Sarah had no way of knowing that her hidden tattoo would soon become the key to changing everything about how her instructors and fellow candidates saw her. But that revelation was still to come, and for now, she simply focused on making it through one more day in the most challenging military training program in the world. The third phase of BUD/S training brought land warfare exercises, and with it came Commander James Steele Morrison, a legend in the SEAL community. Morrison had earned his nickname not just for his unwavering resolve, but for his ability to see potential in candidates that others had written off. He had completed 6 combat deployments and was credited with developing some of the most effective small unit tactics used by special operations forces worldwide. When Commander Morrison arrived at the training base, the atmosphere immediately changed. Unlike the other instructors who seemed to enjoy breaking down candidates through intimidation, Morrison observed quietly, taking notes and watching how each candidate responded under pressure. He had heard about the female candidate who was somehow still surviving in a program where 60% of her original class had already quit. Sarah first encountered Commander Morrison during a night navigation exercise in the mountains east of San Diego. The candidates had been dropped off in pairs with only a compass, map, and coordinates for 3 checkpoints they needed to reach before dawn. Sarah had been paired with Candidate Roberts, a quiet guy from Montana who had been one of the few to treat her with basic respect throughout training. As they moved through dense brush in complete darkness, following terrain features, and checking their compass bearings every few minutes, they heard the sound of someone crashing through the woods nearby. It was Candidate Thompson, who had become separated from his partner and was clearly lost. Sarah could hear the panic in his voice as he called out for help. Roberts wanted to keep moving toward their objective. "Not our problem," he whispered. "If we stop to help him, we might not make our time hacks." But Sarah couldn't leave a teammate struggling in the wilderness. "We're all supposed to make it through this together," she said. And before Roberts could stop her, she called out to Thompson to guide him toward their position. When Thompson reached them, he was scratched up from thorns and clearly rattled. His partner had twisted an ankle early in the exercise, and they had decided to split up, thinking it would be faster. Now Thompson was lost, and his partner was somewhere behind them, injured and alone. Sarah made a quick decision. She gave Roberts her coordinates and told him to continue to the checkpoints, while she backtracked with Thompson to find his injured partner. "This is crazy, Martinez," Roberts warned. "You'll never make the time limit." "Then I'll fail," Sarah replied. "But I won't leave people behind." What none of them knew was that Commander Morrison was shadowing their exercise, moving through the woods like a ghost, and observing how candidates reacted when faced with difficult decisions. He had been following Sarah's team when the situation with Thompson developed, and he watched with interest as she chose to sacrifice her own success to help struggling teammates. It took Sarah and Thompson nearly an hour to locate his partner, Candidate Williams, who was sitting against a tree with his ankle swollen to twice its normal size. Sarah quickly fashioned a splint using materials from her pack and helped Williams to his feet. Then, with Thompson on one side and Sarah on the other, they began the slow journey toward the first checkpoint. By the time they reached the rendezvous point, dawn was breaking and they were over an hour late. Chief Rodriguez was waiting with a clipboard, already writing up their failure reports. Well, he said with a smirk. "Looks like Martinez finally found something she couldn't handle." But before he could continue his criticism, Commander Morrison emerged from the tree line behind them. "Chief, I need to see the after-action reports for all candidates before you submit them," he said calmly. Rodriguez snapped to attention. "Yes, sir. But these 3 failed to meet their time requirements." Morrison nodded thoughtfully, then surprised everyone by addressing Sarah directly. "Candidate Martinez, explain your decision-making process during this exercise." Sarah stood at attention, expecting to be disciplined for her failure. "Sir, Candidate Thompson became separated from his partner and was lost. Candidate Williams was injured and unable to continue effectively. I made the tactical decision that mission success required getting all team members safely to the objective, even if it meant missing time hacks." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "And you were willing to accept a failing grade for this exercise to ensure no one was left behind?" "Yes, sir." "Interesting." Morrison made some notes on his clipboard. "Chief Rodriguez, mark these 3 candidates as passing this exercise. They demonstrated the kind of teamwork and leadership we need in the field." Rodriguez's jaw dropped. "Sir, but they were over an hour late." "Chief, in real combat operations, leaving wounded teammates behind is not an option. These candidates showed they understand that principle. That's worth more than meeting arbitrary time limits." As they walked back to base, Sarah couldn't believe what had just happened. For the first time since training began, an instructor had publicly praised her decision-making. But more importantly, She had proven to herself that her instincts about leadership and teamwork were correct. Over the next few weeks, Commander Morrison began taking a more active role in the training. He would appear unexpectedly during exercises, watching how candidates interacted with each other and how they responded to stress. Sarah noticed that he seemed to be paying particular attention to her, but not in the critical way she had grown accustomed to from other instructors. During a particularly challenging underwater demolition exercise, where candidates had to plant simulated explosive charges on a mock enemy vessel while holding their breath, Sarah struggled more than usual. She had always been a strong swimmer, but the combination of cold water, heavy equipment, and the pressure to perform flawlessly was taking its toll. On her third attempt to complete the exercise, Sarah's oxygen ran out just as she was attaching the final charge. Instead of surfacing immediately, which would have meant failing the exercise, she completed the task while her vision began to tunnel from lack of oxygen. She surfaced, gasping and disoriented, but the charge was properly placed. Commander Morrison, who had been observing from a boat nearby, jumped into the water fully clothed to assist her. As he helped her to the ladder, Sarah's training shirt was torn and riding up, revealing the top portion of her tattoo. Morrison caught a glimpse of the military cemetery imagery and stopped. "Candidate Martinez, I need to see you in my office after evening chow." Sarah's heart sank. She assumed she was in trouble for nearly drowning during the exercise, or perhaps Morrison had seen enough of her tattoo to ask uncomfortable questions. As she sat in the waiting area outside his office that evening, she prepared herself for the worst. When Morrison called her in, his office was dimly lit and filled with military memorabilia from his years of service. Photos of his various units lined the walls, along with commendations and award from a distinguished career. "Candidate Martinez, during today's exercise, I noticed what appeared to be a military-themed tattoo. I'd like you to tell me about it." Sarah had dreaded this moment since the beginning of training. She had known that eventually someone would see the tattoo and ask questions. Taking a deep breath, she stood and turned around, lifting her shirt to reveal the full back piece. Commander Morrison studied the tattoo in silence for several minutes. The detail was extraordinary. Each gravestone was individually crafted, and the names on the ribbons held by the eagle were clearly visible. But it wasn't the artistry that captured his attention. It was the names themselves. Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez. Morrison read aloud. "I served with him in Afghanistan. He was killed by an IED outside Kandahar." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He was my father, sir." Morrison continued reading. "Sergeant Carlos Martinez, Corporal Daniel Martinez." His voice grew quieter. "How many family members have you lost in combat?" "Candidate Martinez?" "7, sir. 3 generations of my family have served in the military. This tattoo, it's my way of carrying them with me." Morrison was quiet for a long time, studying the tattoo and the photos on his wall. Finally, he spoke. "Candidate Martinez, why didn't you tell anyone about your family's service record when you arrived here?" "I didn't want special treatment, sir. I wanted to earn my place here based on my own abilities, not because people felt sorry for me or because of my family history." Morrison nodded slowly. "And the harassment from other candidates? The comments about not belonging here?" Sarah was surprised that he knew about the treatment she had been receiving. "I can handle it, sir. I know I have to prove myself." "No, Candidate Martinez, you don't." Morrison's voice took on a tone of authority that made Sarah stand straighter. "You've already proven yourself. What you need to understand is that some of these other candidates don't deserve to serve alongside someone with your family sacrifice and your personal dedication." He walked over to one of the photos on his wall, which showed a group of soldiers in Afghanistan. "This is a picture of the unit where your father died. I was the platoon leader that day. Miguel Martinez saved 4 lives when he threw himself on that IED. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star." Sarah felt her knees go weak. She had never known the details of her father's death, only that he had died serving his country. Her mother had kept the specifics from her, thinking it would be too painful. "Your father was one of the finest soldiers I ever served with," Morrison continued. "And from what I've observed over the past few weeks, You've inherited his courage and his commitment to never leaving anyone behind. Morrison turned to face her directly. Tomorrow, I'm going to address your training class. The harassment stops now, and anyone who has a problem with that can ring the bell and find another career path. You've earned your place here through blood, sacrifice, and performance. It's time everyone else recognized that. As Sarah left Commander Morrison's office that night, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders that she had been carrying for months. For the first time since arriving at BUD/S, she felt like she truly belonged there. But she also knew that the real test was yet to come. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and not everyone in her class would be happy about Commander Morrison's intervention on her behalf. The final phase of training was approaching, and Sarah would need every bit of strength and determination she possessed to make it through. But now she had something she hadn't had before, the knowledge that someone in command truly believed in her abilities and understood the sacrifice that had brought her to this point. The hidden tattoo had revealed more than just her family history. It had shown her that sometimes the most important battles are won not through physical strength, but through the courage to honor those who came before us. The next morning arrived with unusual tension in the air. Word had spread through the barracks that Commander Morrison wanted to address the entire remaining class, which now numbered only 38 candidates. As they assembled in the briefing room, Sarah could feel the curious and sometimes hostile glances from her classmates. Commander Morrison entered the room with the same quiet authority he always carried, but there was something different in his expression. This wasn't going to be a routine training briefing. "Gentlemen and lady," he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "I've been observing this class for several weeks now, and I have some things that need to be said." He walked to the front of the room and turned to face them directly. "Some of you seem to be under the impression that this training is about proving your individual superiority over your classmates. You're wrong. This training is about forging a team of warriors who could depend on each other in the most extreme circumstances imaginable." Morrison's eyes scanned the room, making contact with several candidates who had been particularly vocal in their criticism of Sarah. "I've observed harassment, exclusion, and behavior that has no place among future SEALs. This ends today." Candidate Johnson, the former football player who had been one of Sarah's harshest critics, raised his hand. "Sir, with respect, don't you think combat effectiveness should be our primary concern? Some of us have legitimate questions about physical capabilities in combat situations." Morrison's expression hardened. "Candidate Johnson, stand up." Johnson rose to his feet, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Tell me about your family's military service." "Johnson." "Sir, my grandfather served in World War II, and my uncle was in the Navy, but not in combat roles." Morrison nodded. "And you, Williams?" Candidate Williams stood. "My father was in the Army National Guard, sir. He deployed to Iraq for one tour." Morrison continued around the room, asking several candidates about their family military backgrounds. Most had limited military family history, and none had experienced the kind of generational sacrifice that Sarah's family had endured. Finally, Morrison turned to Sarah. "Candidate Martinez, please stand and face the class." Sarah's heart pounded as she rose and turned around. She knew what was coming. "Remove your shirt and show them what you've been hiding," Morrison commanded. With shaking hands, Sarah lifted her training shirt over her head, revealing the full tattoo that covered her back. The room fell completely silent as her classmates took in the intricate memorial that honored her fallen family members. Morrison's voice filled the silence. "Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, Silver Star recipient, killed in action in Afghanistan while saving the lives of 4 fellow soldiers." He pointed to the first name on the ribbons. "Sergeant Carlos Martinez, Bronze Star recipient, killed in action in Iraq during urban combat operations." Corporal Daniel Martinez, Purple Heart recipient, killed in action in Syria while providing cover for wounded civilians. As Morrison read each name and their service record, which he had researched overnight, the atmosphere in the room completely changed. Several candidates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others stared at Sarah with newfound respect. 7 members of candidate Martinez's family have died serving this country. Morrison continued. 7 heroes who gave their lives so that we could sit in this room today and have the privilege of training to defend our nation. He walked over to stand beside Sarah. While some of you have been questioning whether she belongs here, candidate Martinez has been carrying the weight of their sacrifice every single day. She didn't ask for special treatment. She didn't use her family history to gain sympathy or advantage. She simply put her head down and outperformed many of you in nearly every metric we measure. Morrison gestured for Sarah to put her shirt back on and sit down. Now, let me address the concerns about combat effectiveness. 2 weeks ago, during night navigation training, candidate Martinez made a choice to sacrifice her own success to ensure that no teammates were left behind. She demonstrated the exact kind of leadership and selflessness that defines a true SEAL. He pulled out a folder and began reading statistics. Candidate Martinez currently ranks 3rd in the class for physical fitness scores. She ranks 1st in swimming endurance. She ranks 2nd in academic testing. She has never quit an exercise, never requested special accommodation, and has never complained about treatment that would have caused many of you to ring the bell weeks ago. The room remained silent as Morrison delivered his final points. But here's what separates her from most of you. When candidate Thompson was lost during navigation training, how many of you were willing to risk your own success to help him? He looked around the room. When candidate Williams was injured, how many of you offered to carry extra weight so he could keep up with the team? Morrison's voice rose slightly. Combat effectiveness isn't just about how much you can bench press or how fast you can run. It's about character. It's about sacrifice. It's about understanding that the mission and your teammates come before your own interests. And in those areas, candidate Martinez has proven herself superior to most of this class. Candidate Roberts, who had been Sarah's partner during the navigation exercise, slowly raised his hand. Sir, permission to speak? Go ahead, Roberts. Sir, candidate Martinez saved my ass during the underwater demolition exercise last week. I was tangled in some equipment and running out of air. She risked her own safety to get me untangled and to the surface. I never thanked her properly. Morrison nodded. Anyone else have something to say? Candidate Williams, whose ankle Sarah had helped treat, stood up. Sir, she fashioned a field splint that allowed me to complete training when I was ready to quit. The medics said she probably saved me from permanent injury by stabilizing my ankle properly. One by one, several other candidates began sharing stories of times when Sarah had helped them, encouraged them, or made sacrifices for the team that they had never properly acknowledged. The picture that emerged was of someone who had been consistently putting the team first while enduring harassment and isolation. Morrison listened to each account, then addressed the room again. Gentlemen, you have a choice to make. You can continue to focus on outdated prejudices and arbitrary physical standards, or you can recognize that you're in the presence of someone who represents the very best of what it means to be a SEAL. He walked to the back of the room. The final phase of training starts tomorrow. We will be conducting live-fire exercises, advanced combat simulations, and scenario-based leadership challenges. I guarantee you that some of you will not make it through. The candidates who succeed will be those who understand that this isn't about individual glory. It's about becoming part of something bigger than themselves. Morrison paused at the door. Any candidate who continues to engage in harassment or exclusionary behavior will be immediately removed from the program. Not because I'm protecting candidate Martinez, but because that behavior indicates a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be a Navy SEAL. After Morrison left, the room remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Johnson approached Sarah. Martinez, I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you, and I'm sorry for the way I've treated you. Williams nodded in agreement. We all owe you an apology. I had no idea about your family history, but even without knowing that, we should have treated you better. Over the next few hours, nearly every candidate in the class approached Sarah to apologize or to thank her for times she had helped them without expecting anything in return. The atmosphere completely shifted, And for the first time since arriving at BUD/S, Sarah felt like she was truly part of the team. The final phase of training proved to be the most challenging yet. They conducted nighttime raids on simulated enemy compounds, practiced hostage rescue scenarios, and endured advanced survival training in the desert. Throughout it all, Sarah's teammates no longer questioned her abilities. Instead, they relied on her judgment and leadership. During the final exercise, a multi-day scenario that tested everything they had learned, Sarah's boat crew was assigned to conduct a reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines. When their communications equipment was damaged and they lost contact with command, Sarah made the decision to adapt their mission parameters to complete the objective while ensuring everyone made it back safely. Her tactical decisions during that exercise were later used as examples in SEAL training manuals. She had demonstrated the ability to think quickly under pressure, adapt to changing circumstances, and lead effectively in combat situations. On graduation day, as Sarah stood with the 26 candidates who had successfully completed BUD/S training, she thought about her father, her brother, and all the family members whose sacrifice had brought her to this moment. The tattoo on her back was no longer hidden. It had become a symbol of the heritage and values she brought to her new role as a Navy SEAL. Commander Morrison approached her after the ceremony. "Martinez, I have your orders for your first deployment. You're being assigned to SEAL Team 7, one of our most elite units. They specifically requested you based on your performance during training." Sarah felt a surge of pride and gratitude. "Sir, I won't let you down." Morrison smiled. "You already haven't. Your father would be proud of the warrior you've become." As Sarah looked out at the ocean where she had endured countless hours of brutal training, she realized that the harassment and doubt she had faced had only made her stronger. She had proven that dedication, character, and heart mattered more than stereotypes or prejudices. The little girl from Texas who had dreamed of becoming a Navy SEAL had achieved her goal, but more importantly, she had honored her family's legacy and opened doors for future generations of women who dared to dream of serving in elite military units. 6 months later, during her first combat deployment, Sarah would save the lives of 3 wounded soldiers while under heavy enemy fire, earning her a Bronze Star and the respect of the entire Special Operations community. But that night, as she celebrated with her classmates who had become her brothers and sisters, she knew that the real victory had been won not through physical strength or tactical skill, but through the courage to be true to herself and to honor those who had sacrificed everything for the values she now defended. The tattoo that had once been her secret had become her strength, and the mockery she had endured had transformed into the foundation of lifelong bonds with some of the finest warriors in the world. Sarah Martinez had not just survived Navy SEAL training. She had redefined what it meant to be a SEAL, proving that the heart of a warrior knows no gender, only honor, courage, and commitment to something greater than oneself.